All right. Welcome. We are currently streaming live in the Streamline Business Strategies Facebook group. If you are coming on here and watching in the group, let us know you're here. Share a hello. What is this? Tuesday? Happy Tuesday. Maybe an emoji that reflects your mood for the day. Love to hear that you're here. Or if you're on replay, please just share that you're on replay. If you are watching on YouTube or listening on the Small Biz 101 podcast, hello to you as well. Thank you for being here. And I encourage you, if you like what you hear, to please hit the subscribe button. I do these interviews once a month to support small business owners by providing guest experts in areas needed by entrepreneurs, right? So we've done legal, we've done mindset support. We've talked with a woman who provides online business management services recently, and we'll be talking about branding and photography together in September. But today I am so excited to delve into the importance of discovering your ideal niche and how understanding and embracing your core values can be the catalyst for creating a truly thriving and impactful business. So my guest today is Melissa Davis. Melissa is on a mission to make sure that every changemaker has a fair shot at bringing their impact to the world. Through Melissa's work with startups and entrepreneurs, she has uncovered an invaluable process for helping them get clarity on their purpose, impact, and perfect business. So welcome, Melissa. I'm so glad to have you here with us.
I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. Melissa and I just met each other not too long ago. It was a couple of months ago. And I think at the time we couldn't even remember how we got connected, but you know how it is. There are all kinds of mutual connections out there. But I was so impressed with the work that Melissa does and the impact that it truly has on businesses that I really wanted to bring her in and share this with all of you. So Melissa, would you, you'll describe it better than I can. Would you please tell us about the work that you do?
Yeah. So I work with brand new and pivoting entrepreneurs. I primarily work with coaches and consultants, but I got my start working in the startup space. So, working with those looking for VC funding and really trying to scale in a startup capacity. But in that really early space where founders and entrepreneurs are getting that foundational clarity. And foundational clarity is different than strategic clarity, and it's different than execution strategy. It's that really basic stuff that helps entrepreneurs get the foundation for building the rest of their business. And that's clarity around things like, what do I stand for? Who do I serve? What's the problem I actually solve? What's my offer? What is my gift and what is my offering to the world? And how do I talk about that? So what I do is help entrepreneurs get clarity around that foundational stuff so they can actually start building it, so they can start growing it, and so they can start talking about it.
Oh, and that is just, it's so critical because so often people will just jump into a business and yeah, they're good at what they do and they jump right into doing that. But it benefits you so much more to take that time to really figure out those foundational elements first, because everything truly should build on that. It really streamlines things for businesses and makes them more impactful.
Well, and my mission stems from what I saw in the entrepreneurial space. All of these entrepreneurs, they had these really big visions and gifts to give to the world, but who jumped in and, like you said, they kind of skip through that foundational piece and end up trying to create strategy and start building without getting the clarity. And what happens is they flounder, right? They spin their wheels. Then they have doubts about whether they're really cut out for this work, really, able to bring a vision to life. And so what can happen is if we don't get that really strong foundational clarity, even if you have all of these gifts to bring to the world, and you're meant to do something bigger and start something, can end up really doubting that you have the capacity and that you can live to this potential that you have. And so, to me, the worst thing in the world is to kind of sit there and think you're not going to reach your potential, knowing that you have this potential, and simply skipping the step of really investing in understanding yourself and your business and what you're really meant to be doing with that work. Now, that's not to say that when you get this foundational clarity, you know exactly what your business is going to look like, right? And how to do it. That's not, that's not what happens to us. But what happens is, like, I understand how to talk about why I do or want to do this work, right? I can explain to the world what I'm really meant to do with this work, and whether that looks like A, B, C, or D, that's okay, because I really have a strong understanding of my purpose in this work.
When you talk about foundational clarity and purpose in this work, would you share a bit more about what are the elements of that foundational clarity? Like,
Yeah,
what should people really be considering here?
They should be considering whether they understand some kind of key components of their business. And like the tactical sense, those kind of key components are: who's my niche, right? Where do I meet them in the journey? What problem do I solve, right? What do they believe the problem is, right? Where do I meet them? What does my niche look like? Who do the people I serve? What do they look like? What do they want? And how am I different from other people doing something similar? And so, it can range anywhere from, I don't really know what this business looks like at all, right? And so they need to really kind of pull out their core gifts, right? I call them kind of like your superpowers, right? What are your gifts, right? So it ranges anywhere from, I know I have all this potential and I'm just like this really big desire to create impact, but I don't really know what my superpowers are. 2, I have this really amazing vision for what I want to create in the world, but I don't know exactly where to jump in and start building it, right? It could be at one of 50 different points, right? And our niche, we meet our niche somewhere on a journey, and they recognize the problem differently at every point of that journey. And we really need to understand where we meet them, because how to talk about it at this point in the journey, where maybe somebody's experiencing an external problem, like I just don't know how to do it, versus I'm meeting internal resistance. It's a totally different problem. As a coach, you may be doing the same type of work, right, for the same reason. But if you don't understand where you really want to meet your niche, right, that is part of your niche. If you really don't understand where your gifts intersect with where they're experiencing the problem, it's really hard to move forward. And then I have entrepreneurs who none of my entrepreneurs generally lack for ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
I often work with visionaries, and they have, not 1 or 2 ideas, they have 100 ideas, or they can't decide between 3 or 4 different niches. They're good at a bunch of different things. They're passionate about a lot of different areas, and they have to figure out, where do I start? Where do I really put a stake in the ground and start to work towards, something in this business that is actually aligned to me and I'm going to feel happy and fulfilled. So it's kind of, work with entrepreneurs at different parts of their journey. But it's all this, understanding of, where do I need clarity and what's possible for me when I can get that. So we can start to take action when we get that foundational clarity. Then we can move into that strategic space or that execution space. I hope I answered the question. I kind of
Oh, there was so much good stuff in there. And actually, Heather Murphy joined us and asked a question. And actually, this is where I was going next. So Heather said, I think as a small business, sometimes it's hard to find your niche, especially when you're starting out. You want to do it all and you almost need to scale back. That's how it's been for her and her husband. So curious, Melissa, how do you help people? How does a small business owner know or determine really who their ideal niche is?
Yes, totally. And by the way, every entrepreneur struggles with narrowing down their niche, right? It's like asking you to cut off an arm sometimes, you're like, but I can serve here, here, and here, right? And sometimes we don't even realize we're trying to serve several different niches. We think of it as one niche, but the reality is it actually could and should be broken out into several different niches. And we have to decide, like I said, where do we meet them, because earlier in the journey is a different niche than later in the journey. Could be the same person several years apart. Here's the most important thing I think that I've realized in my exploration of entrepreneurship and my study around values. Our niche, our ideal niche, shares our values. They share not necessarily every single one of our values, but our strongest values, our niche shares with us. So just to kind of repeat, our top values are shared by our niche. They believe what we believe, they value what we value. And so the first place to start with kind of understanding where and who our ideal niche is getting clarity on our own values. They have tremendous power for helping us reveal who we should be working with. And then, the kind of components of a niche are, who is it, where in the journey are they, and what kinds of outcomes do I want to help them achieve? The more narrow we can get with understanding our niche and making a decision about that niche, the better we are in connecting with them. It's challenging to create a powerful message when our niche is too broad or we're trying to serve two niches. And so sometimes that's the same problem. Our niche is too broad, meaning we're trying to serve them in too many different places. So for instance, if I were trying to serve early entrepreneurs and I were trying to, serve leaders and organizations who have grown to a point where, they now have teams and they have larger organizations are trying to serve. That's too far apart. That's two completely different niches, even if the work I do is the same. Even if the core work could be the same for both of them, the language that I use and the problems that an early entrepreneur are experiencing are much different than the CEO of a larger organization are.
Yeah.
And so that niche is comprised of a lot of these little different elements that identify where exactly they are in their journey and the problem they're experiencing and what they want. And values are at the center of all of that.
Okay. And I want to touch on that next, but there's one thing that came to mind specifically thinking about Heather. Heather just mentioned in here, I have 3 or 4 of them, LOL. Now, Heather has a product-based business. So when you're thinking about that, I just love that you're talking about, thinking about where they are on the journey, your ideal client. But for somebody who's providing products, how do you do that?
It's the same. It really is the same. So you developed this product with a set of values in mind. What's important to you is what's important to them. Do you know what her product is?
Yes. She makes a lot of products, which maybe,
well, give me one.
So she makes beautiful printed gear, t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats with logos and other fabulous designs. She's got a Barbie focused design I just saw yesterday. She's super creative.
So what's really cool about products is that sometimes they're simpler to market than service-based businesses. And so when I think about clothing, that I buy, it's about identity and what you want to portray to the world and the values about how you purchase things. So what I wear reflects my identity. It reflects my choices and it reflects my values. Now, not everything I wear does that, but if I choose to, walk out with like Patagonia on, right? I mean, we tend to buy something like that because it says something about us, right? It says, I value environmental activism. It says, whatever, I value quality clothing. I value recycling, whatever it is, right? We tend to attach identity to our purchases. And those values come through in a lot of different ways. And the values behind the creation of those items show up in the marketing behind them and the stories that we tell around our products. So I don't know anything about her products. They sound very creative. They sound
they're often Buffalo based.
Right. So, we may tell a story about this belief that buying local, products and services is incredibly important. And that belief is central to, the marketing and the positioning of that product. So the ideal customer believes it's important to buy local, as does the seller, right? So they're marketing locally and they're saying, this is important to me. This reflects a value of mine that we should be supporting each other. And it may be that this value of uniqueness, right, shows up there in this, really neat, unique pieces of clothing. Maybe they're one of a kind, right? Each one is different than the next one. And so you see that value, and it's important to me to not have clothes that look like everybody else. And so that value of uniqueness and creativity shows up there. They value that, you value that, and that's why they buy it. And so it's important for us to tell stories around that so that it really emphasizes the values that went into that product and the values that are then reflected in the identity of the buyer. Because clothing specifically is, we wear our values right on our chest, right? With this artwork. And so it says something about me, and I'm interested in displaying my values. And so that's the kind of really neat thing about products sometimes, specifically in fashion and in the artistic space.
Heather, I'm so glad that you asked that question. And she said, yes, local all the way. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I suppose as you're thinking about going back to what you said about meeting your client along their journey. So is part of that, as Heather's ideal clients shift in their desires, like she is right there with them. She's seeing like, for example, the Barbie theme that she just put out with a movie that is really being impactful to women and men, it seems lately. I need to go see it, but
I haven't seen it either.
Yeah. So is that kind of what you're talking about when you're describing meeting them along the way in their different phases? Yeah.
What's interesting is we do sometimes grow with our niche. That is a strategy, especially for coaches and people who are teaching, because we're often only a few steps ahead. Especially early in people's coaching careers and consulting careers, we're not significantly further ahead in our journey than where we're teaching and where we're coaching or consulting. And this is not a bad thing. This is actually quite good. So we've overcome obstacles and understood, we create an understanding of how to guide others through that. So we've gotten clarity and we've gained experience. And so now we're coming back to teach that, right? And when we're much further along, we lose track of that. And either it's not very interesting for us to coach and consult on anymore, back in those early problems, or we've lost track of what it feels like to be there. And so you do find that with some coaches and consultants, they kind of follow their niche. but not everybody. I mean, we often do stay there because we deepen our understanding as we coach and as we consult, right? We deepen our understanding of how to work and how to guide and be amazing coaches in that space. So those are two different options, that you can grow with your niche, right? And continue to move down the journey with them. And we do that with products sometimes, right? We will sometimes for instance, if anyone in your audience has something that they like a lead magnet, right? May meet them at a point that's just a little bit earlier in the journey. The problem is a little bit earlier. So let me give you an example of that. See if I can come up with something on the fly. Like in the coaching space, let's say, we focus on an external problem of, I don't know how to generate leads for my business, right? But what I'm really amazing at is helping you create a message around your lead magnet, right? So the first part is maybe a checklist for expanding your LinkedIn network, right? And it's it's 12 tactics or whatever to engage your LinkedIn network to grow your leads. And then, it kind of helps them, whatever you put out there helps them to recognize the next problem, which might be more internal, meaning you're unclear about how to talk to your niche about the problem that you solve for them. I think that was a really awful example, but we can, in our work, actually introduce them to where we want to meet them on the journey, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Or we might solve one problem for them earlier in the journey through one product, and then we may meet them at the next part of the journey with another offering, if they're close enough to each other. And so our marketing goes only after that first point in the journey, the first problem that they're experiencing. So maybe, the first part is that foundational clarity, like, I don't know how to talk about my core gifts, and, getting clarity around the niche I serve, so we'll use my own example. And then, maybe I choose down the road to look at how do I take that marketing and expand it into building out a website that really emphasizes that powerful core message that you work at here. So it's the next step, right? Now my problem is, how do I expand that core message into my marketing?
That makes perfect sense. Thank you for expanding on that. That's really helpful. Now, you have talked about values and superpowers, and I think you've touched on the answer to this a bit already, but I'm curious if you could go a little deeper into how does a business owner's or coach or consultants values, how are those values their superpowers in creating a really impactful and fabulous business?
Yeah, so, we touched on one of the things, right? Our niche shares our top values. But our values have so much more capacity and reveal so much more in our business. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So the kind of the two places that I'm going to kind of take you with this is, one or more of our values helps to reveal the problem that we solve for our niche. And also some of our values, one or more of our values, help to reveal how we uniquely serve them. So one helps us identify the problem, the real problem that we solve for people. And the other one helps us identify how we uniquely show up. So, I mean, those really are our gifts, right? Our gifts in solving a problem for them.
Okay.
So when I talk about the problem that we solve for people, they generally, and when I say the problem that they're experiencing, it's the problem that they recognize right now as the problem that they're experiencing. And so what's interesting about the problem that your niche is experiencing is, we as somebody who is solving the problem for them may see their problem as different than the way they see their problem. And we have to recognize that. Sometimes it's the same, right? You're looking for a photographer for your wedding. The problem is you don't know who to hire, and I solved that problem. Like, boop, happy, right? But sometimes it's not that clear. Sometimes it's, I don't know how to create a strategy around finding my niche, right? Or I don't know how to create a good message that connects with my niche. And I might recognize the problem is you don't know who your niche is, right? Or I may recognize, and this is a real example, I may recognize the problem is you're not clear on your values, right? And so you don't understand your niche. You don't know who your niche is. That's not what they're experiencing as the problem. They're not going, you know what, Melissa? I think I need to get clear on my values. That's the problem.
Right.
That's not what's happening. People don't think I need to, that's a behind the scenes thing. That's like, I call it how the sausage is made, right? I see that as the solution to your problem, but you may not see that as the problem. And so the really cool thing about our values is that it helps us to recognize both and how to meet them where they're, really experiencing the pain. So going back to values, one or more of our values is lived for us. So lived meaning we fully embody that value. So a value is either lived or it's partially lived or aspired. So if let's say one of my very top values is personal accountability. And personal accountability to me means doing what I said I was going to do, showing up for myself, showing up for other people, not blaming others, taking personal accountability for my own potential and the outcomes in my life, right? The path I'm on. And so if I'm fully living that value and I've kind of figured out how to do that, and I look at the people that I want to serve, and it's a gap value for them, meaning they're not fully living that value. They don't feel, and this is where it shows up for me, desperately want to live to their highest potential. And it's a gap. And so our ideal niche, all they really want to do is be able to fully live their values. All of our niches, whether you have a product or you're a coach or you're in a service business, what we really help people do is fully live their top values. We offer a solution that helps them live their values. Now, your job is to understand which one of your own top values is actually a gap value for them. And a gap value meaning they're not able to fully live that value, and you can help them do that. Now, you may not be able to 100% help somebody fully live all their top values. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that one of your own top values is a gap value for your ideal niche, and you help them live that value fully, right? In some way or another, in whatever you help them do for them. And so when I say we help them solve a problem, right, it's part of the problem they're experiencing. For me, I recognize that I have all this potential. And what I really help them do is to get the clarity required to do that, to get closer to living out their full potential. And this is, every niche has this gap. And your job as an entrepreneur, either as a coach, as a consultant, as a product developer, it's how do I help them close the gap on what they're experiencing and fully live a value? And so that value might be, shopping locally. That value might be living in my authenticity and supporting, a local business. And so I get to wear that right there and I get to live in that. It may be, that your that's another example. Just trying to think of something that's a little bit different that we can kind of give people. If we go back to that wedding photographer, right? living that value of showing that beautiful moment, right? That sentimentality is there. So if maybe, you and your niche as a photographer share this value of capturing that moment of sentimentality, and that's just so important to you to really capture these very specific special moments, and you're willing to pay more for that, right? It's just that you don't want this cookie cutter, inauthentic set of pictures, right? The same pictures that everybody else has because you just pose for them. What's really important is that the photographer gets to know you and your potential spouse and like really follows you and captures really authentic moments, not posed, whatever. That's a shared value. And so what they want to be able to do is to close that gap and to ensure that this really important moment in their life, getting married, is living that value and that they can reflect that down the road.
Oh, I love the way you connected that. It really brings clarity.
Because what's important to you is what's important to your ideal niche.
Yep. Yep.
And we never want to forget that. We never want to forget that, because it's easy to go to try to find somebody who you think is willing to pay you and then try to identify their values when we go about it in a backwards way, right? Your ideal niche shares your top values. Some of them are deal breaker values. Some of them are gap values. We haven't talked about that kind of unique gift yet. I know we're running short on time, but
well, I would love to ask you as you're speaking of this, because I come across some people who they're unable to, like you actually mentioned this a little bit. Some people are not able to identify their values. They may inherently know, but in terms of expressing them or even thinking about using them for their business, how do you help people determine those?
We spend a lot of time on them. We spend a lot of time on
You
them.
have a
I have a values
process for
exercise
working.
that I send all my new clients. And it's something that they work on their own. And then, we sit down and we test them and we refine them and we talk through them, and we do a lot of moving around and kind of refining them. And we want to understand how they show up and play in your life. And not every value is lived by us. There are a lot of things that are really important to us that we don't live fully in our lives, and we recognize these gaps in our own life. And then we kind of come back to that superpowers thing. There are values that you have that are very active in the gift that you have, that you bring to your offer, right? And how you serve and how you show up in your work. And so it's really, what happens is when we start to take a look at these values, they form a picture of the person, the niche that you serve and your, really powerful gifts and the impact that you get to make. And so they're just so central to that. And that's, one of the reasons that I'm just completely obsessed with values is because they're so dynamic and they play a role in every aspect of our lives, but they're so central to making an impact in our work.
Mm-hmm.
And because they tell us so much about our ideal niche, they tell us so much about our offer and how we can maintain that sense of fulfillment and wonder and passion in our work.
Well, and I can see as you're talking about this, the depth that's needed to explore that. So often we'll go through a list of words and say, okay, I'll check these off. These are my values, but you really do a deep dive exploration into this to help people realize. And I like the way you shared as well. Some are lived, some are partially lived, some we aspire
Some are
to.
one-way street and two-way street values. Some are deal breaker values.
Oh, so cool. Oh, there's so much good stuff here.
Many aspects of our values. They play different roles in our lives too. We sometimes think of values are these like aspirational things, like what's important to me and their outcomes that we're looking for. When in reality, they're like this internal navigation system that we have for understanding, who we like, trust, and respect, how to make decisions in our lives, right? And the impact that we're meant to make. There are a lot of layers to values, and it's such a fascinating space. And my ideal clients are like really excited to dive into that. I think if, you're either attracted to really deeply understanding yourself, or you know, or you're not necessarily. And that's either one is okay. It's a completely fascinating space for me. And it just provides so much insight. It's just so useful.
I will post this in all of the platforms, your contact information, but would you share live what is the best way to reach you for people who would like to dive into this deeper? It really is such a fascinating topic.
So they can visit my website at humanitync.world, and LinkedIn. Those are the two places that they could find me. I'm not super active on LinkedIn. I'm going to get more active on LinkedIn. It's coming.
Well, we were speaking earlier, it's summer, and sometimes things shift a little bit in the summertime, particularly with families and life events. So I know you'll get to it, but there's such importance in this topic. And I know this is something we could talk about for days, but I would like to ask you, is there anything that I haven't asked you today that you feel would be important to share to a small business owner audience that perhaps I didn't ask, but you'd like to communicate? And if there's not, that's fine. I just thought, oh, there's so much good stuff here.
Yeah, no, I think, here's, I think the most important thing that I have for, entrepreneurs is that if you have a vision, for what you see as possible for you, you really feel that potential is there, then it is. Period. We don't come with vision and an expectation or this sense of potential around us if it isn't there. And you do have the capacity for it. Clarity is not a gift. It's a process. And that's what I would say to people. If you're not clear, it has nothing to do with your ability, your capacity to create big stuff and create impact through your work. It's simply a process and a desire to gather it. And it's a lifelong process in your business and in your life. But it is foundational, and to not overlook it. And if you're struggling between several niches, if you're unclear about how to talk about it, if you don't know what your gifts are, spend time in this area. And I, of course, I'm going to say it, but start with your values, right? And I'm happy to share with your group my values exercise. If you wanna, I can give you the link to that, and you can share that.
That's so generous of you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah, totally. I'll send that over so you can post it. But start with your values, because there's so much information there.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, that last part, as you were describing that, if you can envision it, you can, and I'm paraphrasing, you can reach that. I wanted to shout out names with that to really help empower people, because I can think of people out there who may not have that.
And it may be, totally different pathways, right? Yeah. We're not all meant to be the people who execute everything. Some people are visionaries, and you need to build a team around you to get there. But if you have a vision, you have the capacity to make it happen in some way or another. So,
such a terrific reminder and awareness to have. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Melissa, for being here. This time it just flew by so fast. This was just so informative, and I feel like it was just the very tip. There's so much more to explore. So I really encourage people here to check out Melissa's website. And again, I'll post that for you, and take advantage of that values exercise. I'll be sure to include a link in the group, on the podcast show notes, and on the YouTube channel as well. There's just such helpful information here. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you for having me on. This has been wonderful.
Oh, good. Stand just a minute longer because I'd like to chat with you, but I would like to just wrap up real quickly by thanking the audience who's here, whether you're here on Facebook Live, on YouTube, or in the podcast. I really appreciate you being here. And I am sure took away some amazing nuggets of gold for your own business. I encourage you to join us on our next interview on Tuesday, September 12th at 3 p.m. I will have the amazing Liz Snyder of Elizabeth Snyder Photography as we discuss why headshot photography is so important for professionals and why knowing one's purpose is so closely related to success and happiness in business. So there's synergy here, values, purpose, right? And she'll get into even more specifically how to do that with portrait photography. So looking forward to that. So
I've got to
thanks.
watch that one.
I know it'll be cool. Liz is amazing, as were you. Oh, so everyone have a great day, and we'll catch you on the next show.